All right, guys, we are in the garage installing the Zbros spring kit on the RZR PRO XP4 here. Factory springs are junk. I kind of addressed that in my intro video to this machine. If you watched the last one, if you haven't, check it out. But yeah, we're going to be installing the Zbros Racing full spring kit. I opened the box already. I'm just kind of going to show you how well this stuff was packaged. Super well. So you get the instructions. Parts list. Instructions are pretty detailed. I went through them already. So they're super good instructions. The spring kit's pretty self-explanatory though, but they do give you some starting points for preload and all that stuff, which is nice. They give you new decals for the reservoirs for your shocks. To kind of wrap the reservoirs with their Zbros Racing tuned stickers. So we'll do that when we're all done. And then each set of springs has got its own box. So I opened a couple of these already. I'm going to start in the front, and then we're going to do the rear, and I'll kind of take you guys along for the ride here on how it goes. So front mainspring. The spring is also wrapped up in plastic inside the box. So super quality wrapping job. Things are pristine. Look really well made. Quality, thick coil springs. I mean, you can tell the difference just by looking at them and wrapping your hands around them compared to the stock spring. So that should be light years better. So that's a front main. And then we're going to get, let's see, show you the tent. That's a rear main right there. All right, so that one's open. There's a rear main. And then another front main here. And then you'll see the tender springs. They got a rear and a front in the box. They got them labeled, so front spring, rear spring. So here we got a front spring and a front spring divider. So rear, you're going to use the stock spring divider, and it looks like the front, you're going to use the spring divider. And then in the rear, they also give you crossover rings, which I'll show you here. That's the rear tender, and these are crossover rings. That's for the rear set of springs. So it's going to be good. I'm going to take you along for the ride. I'm going to get the front up in the air, lower shock off. And then I'll show you kind of the way I do it with the shocks still attached to the machine, not taking the whole shock out, make it nice and simple. Alrighty guys, so got the spring kit unboxed, and this is what we're looking at. So the front, you're gonna get a mainspring, a new spring divider, and tender spring. So I can tell you already, that's super heavy duty. Much thicker coils and everything else compared to the OEM springs. They give you a new spring divider for the front. So that's a front setup. Rear looks like a little different. So the rear, as you can see, the springs are also much taller. We have a tender spring and a mainspring. They also give you crossover rings. All right, and then we'll use the factory spring divider in the rear with the crossover springs. So this new spring kit should set us up almost all the way up the shock body with the crossover ring somewhere around here from based on what I'm looking at in the instructions. But let me get the front done first. I'm gonna get the front disassembled, and we'll get back to you here. All right guys, so I got the front end up, tire off, lower shock bolt off. That's all you need to do. You do not need to take the whole entire shock off, put it in a vise, compress the springs. I've seen people doing this on Facebook, on YouTube videos. It's excessive. This is a much faster way to do it. So let me show you how you're gonna get the factory springs off. So crank up the preload collar all the way up to the top. That's gonna loosen your springs, right? So your springs are now loose. Okay. Your shock collar can come off. All right, and then we're just going to slide the springs right off of here. Slide the new springs on, and you're done. Set the preload, put the lower shock bolt in, put your tire back on, and the left front is done. On to the next side, all right? It's that simple. There's no reason to take the whole shock off. Just creating double the work for yourself, all right? All right, guys, one side is done. So it was a piece of cake. They even give you the torque specs in the instructions for the shock bolts. Not, 4 ugga-duggas. So 42 pounds for the lower shock bolt, they say. So install the springs. You'll see the way this kit is designed. So the upper on the stock springs, the weight don't transfer to the bottom spring. until the upper one collapses on itself. So what they call coil bind. So with these, they have a different shaped spring divider, and you put it in facing up. It's kind of cones out in the middle. So as the two springs work together and compress, once this spring divider hits the top, that's when it'll transfer then to the main bottom spring. So pretty cool setup. It gives you the ability to not have to use gigantic long springs and then spring dividers in the front, which made it a lot easier to install the springs on the car and not have to take the shock off. So pretty good design in my opinion. So that's one side done. I'm going to do which is the left front. I'm going to do the right front, and then we'll get back with you on the rear, and we'll show you what's up with the rear spring setup. All right. So for the back, same as the front. Jack it up. Get the tire off. Once you do that, crank up the preload collar all the way up. At that point, you can slide the springs up, pull out the retaining ring on the bottom, as well as the shock guard, and you're going to reuse those two with the new set of springs. New set of springs just slide up and assemble as you took them off. The only thing is with the rears is we're putting crossover rings on the threads, and then once we get it down, get the ride height set, we'll adjust the crossover rings per the instructions, and we'll go over that as well. So let me get the new springs on there, and we'll go from there. All right, so we are done. The rear install went just as easy as the front. They call for a little more preload in the rear than in the front. I didn't put quite as much in it because I was already at the ride height I wanted it to be at. They say start at 0 preload, which means as soon as the collar touches the top of the springs, and then another 8 turns as a starting point. I did 6, and I was at 15 inches about in the rear. So as you can see, this is also another starting point they give you. So the crossover ring, they say 4 1/4 inches from the spring divider. That's where I got it at right now. I just hammered down these power lines here, and they're pretty rutted out, washed out, a lot of whoops, and I did not bottom out the machine at all with the crossover rings there. So I'm inclined to kind of leave them. Bringing them down is just going to make it transition to the stiffer spring sooner. Didn't feel I needed it, so pretty comfortable. As far as the clicker settings on the shocks, in the rear right now, I'm running 4. I'm at 3 in the front. That's a far cry from what I started with the factory springs. I was running, with just me in the car, as it is right now, about 12 clicks front and rear, 10, 11 in the rear, for it to not bottom out. It was bottoming out the front fairly easily. Now I'm at 3 in the front, 4 in the rear, and the ride is much plusher. Another big thing I noticed is the body roll, gone, absolutely gone. So with the 4-seater, you're going to get a little more body roll than the 2-seater, obviously, and you would think with the ride height being now up to where it was, you'd get a little more. But with this proper spring setup, as this obviously is, they dialed it in right. There is no body roll in turns. As a matter of fact, their instructions say that you can go without the front sway bar with their spring setup. So I don't know. I really like the way the ride is now. Maybe I'll pop it off and just see how it is with it off. Obviously, you're going to get much more front end articulation. And they say you're not going to get any more body roll just because their spring setup is dialed in so well. So I can tell you with the sway bar on, there's way less body roll than there was with the factory springs. It was pretty squishy in the front, in my opinion, turning, which I was actually surprised because the tout on these things is that they handle so well. It's the best handling razor ever. And it undoubtedly is with the proper springs, but factory springs are junk. So, but that's nothing new. Polaris's springs have been junky for ever on every machine. These were definitely a little bit probably better as they weren't fully collapsed. like the past models were, you know, as soon as you bring the machine home. But still, I mean, you can see the rear springs here on this setup. It's light years different. I mean, look at that upper tender spring. Look how much space you got there for adjustment on the crossover ring. I mean, you have endless adjustment now. You know, with the crossover ring, if you really wanted to really make it ride stiff, I mean, you could bring it down, you know, an inch above, say, and it's only gonna, you know, it's gonna transition right away to the heavy bottom spring. Or you can just, you know, crank it all the way up and it'll never get used. My opinion is where it's at now, it's hardly being used except for maybe an extreme G out situation, which is what I'm fine with because it's handling really, really cush. I really like it. Like I said, at 3 clicker settings right now in the front and 4 in the rear. And previously I was running around, you know, just about 12 all around to avoid bottoming out on a hard G out with just myself in the car. That alone is exactly what I was looking for. Plus I got my ride height. From what they say, I shouldn't have to worry about any settling. So my ride height should stay where it's set at about, it was about 15 inches in the rear to this spot here is where I measured. To right to the bottom of this. Now the bottom of the belly pan under there's got a little hump in it. So that was about 14 1/4. In the front, I measured. So here, I'll show you. So right to here, right to the front edge there of the bottom of the steel front pan, and that is at 14 1/2. So about 14 1/2 in the front. If you measure to the lowest point in the back, you know, 14 1/4. So pretty even across the board. You know, looks good. I'm not going to crank it up more than that. I know some people like to crank the shit out of their springs and get 16 inches of ground clearance, and then, you know, you're blowing axles because your axle boots, or once these ribs start, you know, get all crunched together because you're the angle of your axles. That's when you start blowing axles because you tear the axle boots, the grease comes out, and then before you know it, you know, you're blowing a joint. So I want the thing to be dependable. It rides great. I'm not hitting bottom. Factory 30s. Once these suckers wear out, we'll get 32s on there. That'll give us another inch of ground clearance, and I'm good with that. This thing handles night and day better. Night and day. I'm super, super happy with the purchase for $600 and what was it? $79 for this spring kit. Shipped to my door. You can't beat it. Other kits are $800 to $850. If you order directly from Zbros website, it's about $800 the kit. I ordered from Mountain Offroad. I'll put a link here in the description. I hope I'm saying it right. I'll put a link in the description of the video. But their customer service was great. I messaged the guy. He was on Facebook, and he asked him a couple of questions. He answered me almost immediately. I ordered the kit. I had it at my door in about 4 days, I want to say. So, you know, for the price, the discount they're running on it, unbelievable. Super happy. As you can see, nice side shot. Plenty of ground clearance now. Maybe taking this thing to the dunes February 10th. I'm definitely taking my Raptor and my daughter's quad. If my wife decides to come, if she can get off for a couple days, we're going to take this as well. And she'll ride around on this with my son in it and follow us, me and my daughter, around on the quads. So it'll be a good time. We'll get some video footage of that if the machine goes, but I'll definitely have some video footage of the quads ripping around. So thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions about the spring kit, the install, any of it, leave a comment below. I try to answer all comments. Again, I can't express how easy this was to install. You saw the way I did it. You do not need to take the shocks fully off the machine. Super easy install. If you follow the instructions, even if you've never done it before, if you follow their instructions they send you, which are pretty detailed, you'll have no problem whatsoever. Basic hand tools, 15 millimeter, 17 millimeter, and then, a torque wrench to torque the shock bolts and your lug nuts on your tires and wheels, and you're good to go. So that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in and watching. More mods coming. Once we get that Evo exhaust in, we'll do an install video on that and a little sound clippage. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Ride safe out there. Talk to you soon.